And among all the very depressive lines that I have presented to you and my colleague here too, there is of course some positive aspects that I would like to bring also to your attention. And this is not positive because the international community has achieved a positive swing to the better, but it's because the people on the ground on both sides of the contact line don't believe in this line that is there. So if you ask Ukrainians in Antratsit, which is a big town in areas not controlled by the government, or in Donetsk and Luhansk, people that are not affiliated to those carrying weapons, all of them, with no exception, at least I have heard, will tell you that they are Ukrainians. That's what they tell you. And the other promising aspect of this is that every day we count that the very few crossing points along this very long contact line that, as I said, would stretch from here down to the Latvian-Lithuanian Belarusian border. 15 to 30,000 Ukrainians cross every day that line from one side to the other and back. That is very promising. You don't see this in any other conflict where you have an undercurrent of an ethnic, religious dynamic that would make it a separation really a hard line. The line, and I've said this earlier here, does not exist in the minds of these Ukrainians on either side of the line. It exists in reality on the ground for them, but in their minds it doesn't exist, and that's something positive that I think we should not forget. The people believe and want that this line goes away and that they have their normal lives back they had before. In many of these places, be it Donetsk or Horlivka and other places along the line, this line has divided communities, has divided families, not because there was a divide before there, it was artificial laid through there. You don't see a line when you go to these places. You see the checkpoints, but the line wasn't there before. And then quickly on the stalemate that you have made reference to in Minsk, it's correct that positive news out of these ongoing discussions are hard to come by. But also there, and I don't want to talk it nicely or make diplomacy here, but the fact that there is a platform where everyone that is involved in this conflict sits at one table is a promising aspect. Imagine if it wouldn't be the case that you would have this opportunity to exchange, that you can establish these channels, and whenever the situation deteriorates at the contact line, these channels are needed to control the violence. And that is an important aspect of trying to find a solution, is first of all to have everyone around the table where there is an opportunity to exchange the views, not necessarily to agree, because that happens rarely, and even less so to implement what had been agreed, but the stakeholders have at least found their ways to Minsk, in this case, to a table where they are able to exchange views and are able to maintain channels open in case they're needed to prevent even a worse situation. Thank you.
Actually, this is a command because I've been involved in organizing humanitarian aid for civilians on both sides of the conflict, and it has been going through in the last 2 years, almost 3 years now. I'm glad to hear from Alexander Hoog that he shares also my vision of the attitude of the civilians towards their political reality. So yes, their division line is here in Europe. It might be in Russia, but it is not in people's minds of those who are surviving under bombings. So what changes with the course of time, and the longer the conflict is, the more victims it takes, the harsher it is for people to overcome this trauma which they're subjected to on everyday basis. For instance, Alexander mentioned this tragic case in Avdiivka when 4 civilians were killed, 1 man was wounded, and 3 children became orphans, full orphans. One of them, as far as I know, is so much traumatized that she is not talking any longer. This is a girl of 7, because she was a witness of how her parents were killed just in front of her. But at the same time, the son of the killed people in Avdiivka actually is a student in Donetsk. And then while I was in contact with the son in Donetsk, actually, he told me that he would have to switch his phone for security reasons when he would be on the way to Avdiivka to attend the funeral of his parents. So you see, so this Avdiivka, which is kind of regarded to be Ukrainian in political terms, actually they don't see themselves as separated from Donetsk. This is a suburb of Donetsk. They come and go. They have their family members there and here. So the other person who died in Avdiivka, so she was an IDP living in Kiev for the last 2 years. She came there just seven hours before her death to visit her home. They are not excluding each other. The thing is that when I was in Donetsk the first time, and when I saw wounded children in Donetsk hospital, and when I talked to doctors there, they were telling how our army can shell us. Then the level of anger with the development of the conflict was getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And already in the beginning of 2015, I met the same people in the same hospital in Donetsk, and they were telling, no, we would never forgive. But at the same time, when I'm in constant contact with people on both sides of the conflict. So when they hear about civilian casualties, when they heard about the casualty on the OSCE team, which happened in April, so they sent their condolences because they know what suffering is.
Okay, let's take again. My name is Niina Leinonen. I'm a journalist. I've been around 20 times in East Ukraine, also on the both sides of the contact line. And I totally agree with Oksana what you told about the civilians, because I talked to so many people. Like, yeah, I know. But I have a few comments or questions. You can consider how they are. About the Avdiivka case, Oksana already mentioned. Has OSCE made any investigations? Was it on purpose, hit to the civilian side, or just accidentally because of the bad weapons they have? And another one, Heidi just told that it's a frozen conflict in East Ukraine. I don't see it that way because the war is constantly going on. So if you can clarify a little bit what you mean by this. And also the OSCE, what can you concretely do to help the situation of the civilians in the area? Because you've been there 2-3 years already, and I have friends who've been working as monitors for the OSCE from Finland, and they tell me that, okay, we are ready to go back when there is a ceasefire to monitor, but they don't want to go back now because the war is still going on and they are there as civilians.
All the findings with regard to that incident in Avdiivka over the weekend can be found in our reports that have been made public the Monday afterwards. What we have assessed was the cause was a single artillery shell that hit that house, fired from a southerly direction, and that is where we can go with the tools that we have at hand and with the mandate that we have. You should all know that we have no investigative mandate and we are not an intelligence gathering operation. The monitors can go as far as into these areas and report what they see and what they hear, but they are not police officers or they are not forensic examiners as to what actually has happened. And it's not because they don't want to do it, it's because they have no mandate to do so. What is important to say is that in many occasions our findings are very precise. It even identifies the person who has committed the violence. In none of all the many hundreds of reports that we have issued since the beginning of the conflict has anyone ever been held to account to our knowledge. The violations that I have told you, the 11,000 ceasefire violations per week that we report, go unpunished. There is no disciplinary measures applied to those who violate that rule on the ground, and there is no political costs involved for those who are not taking action to stop it. Our task is to document compliance or non-compliance. It's the task of those who make these decisions to ensure that their word and their promise is being held. I can fully understand to your second point, that there are monitors that do not want to come back, facing this reality on the ground. The work is dangerous, and the risk of being injured or killed is permanently there. We of course try to protect our staff through proper selection, training, equipment, but you can't exclude all of the risks, and the only way to protect someone 100% would to send the person home. Then you would protect the person completely. So there is an inherent risk of doing that work. We're not running blind into these risks, but the work itself in a highly kinetic active area is risky. But we are grateful for the 25 Finns that work among us, and for all the 600 plus monitors that continue to do the good work on both sides of the line. Thank you.
Actually, I'd like to ask you, Alexander, what could be a way to bring those perpetrators to account? Should the UN get more involved, or what are the actual, let's say, who is failing and who should take this responsibility of stopping the impunity?
Well, as said, first of all, the signatories to Minsk have agreed to stop firing, to withdraw weapons, and to demine, just to mention a few. These are the first few agreements they have reached. There's a whole litany of other measures they have agreed. Just take these three first ones. Now, they have agreed to stop it. If they're not doing it, they break their promise. Now, either they have ordered it to be broken, or they tolerate it to be broken. If they tolerate it, then they need to stop doing that and apply disciplinary measures for which there is no new agreement needed. Every force that is in place has measures to discipline, be it regular or irregular. That should not be a problem. I can tell you an example of how it actually works, and just take a less violent but still intimidated example where a few days ago one of our female mission members had been sexually harassed at a non-government controlled checkpoint. We have brought this to the attention of senior so-called Donetsk People's Republic members and said this has to stop, and the one culprit that was responsible should be identified and held to be account. The response we get was dismissive, and we were told the act, which was clearly intimidating our staff member, was nothing more than a bad joke and we shouldn't take it that serious. So you see there is one very simple measure to apply it. One must hold those who violate these agreements to account. That's the responsibility of those on the ground who have a command power, but it's also those that have a political responsibility, those who have put their names on the dotted line in these agreements. And last, of course, it is also the responsibility of the international community to look at that and not to accept 11,000 ceasefire violations per week as normal. It isn't normal to have a conflict 3 years long raging that still produces 11,000 ceasefire violations. One of these violations is enough to kill 4 people. We have just heard one explosion is enough to kill 4 people. We have 11,000 of those every week. It is not normal to accept this as normal, and that is another measure that one should accept. I can just but repeat to invite you to read our reports where you can find this information. Lots of it cannot be attributed because we don't see everything, but you will find there a lot of information where attribution is very clear. And there, all of you, the public, but also government officials in all OSCE participating states, from east to west, have the possibility to make informed decisions in terms of how to tackle that specific conflict. The information we provide is objective, it is not manipulated, there is no filter to it, and it doesn't origin out of a political agenda, it originates out of a mandate given to us by 57 participating states in consensus. They have endorsed the way the mission collects information, and that should also be the way the information should be used consequently. Thank you.
I would like to answer the question on the nature of the conflict. I think I must agree with you that it's not, at least not yet, a frozen conflict. But I think there's a pattern. In that pattern, this is one of the 5 or 6 frozen or freezing conflicts. Then of course you could say the same thing about Nagorno-Karabakh, that there are persistent violations of ceasefire agreements, and it is not frozen, but nevertheless what makes it in some way frozen is that it's been going on for 25 years. So I don't know what you call it, but so let us see how things are developing with the Minsk II agreement, if there will be a solution, what this kind of decentralization model for the two so-called republics will be, and if there will be unification in real terms with Ukraine, or if it will become kind of stay out of the control of the Kiev government. But it seems to me that the Russian Federation is not asking these areas to be integrated to its territory. But that's why I call it controlled instability. That's the way of ruling and let's say preventing the EU neighborhood countries to make their own choices.
My name is Lena Hietanen, I'm a journalist. I was following the OSCE work in the Baltics, Estonia and Latvia for 10 years, and I have to admit I never saw you done anything good. You compromised yourself totally. You left 500,000 Russians without citizenship, their lingual rights are limited, and also in Estonia the religious rights are limited. So now on Crimea and in People's Republic in Donetsk and Lugansk, you have lost them forever, for good. You can never build up that kind of a apartheid system there. Are you disappointed, or do you think that, can you understand that those Russians, they never trust you? Can you understand their doubts on you?
Thank you. I think you raise a very important point in terms of where the OSCE should put its value and its weight. But I'm afraid the answer to your question is far more complicated, because the situation is not black and white in these areas. You have a mix where minority rights encounter national rights, where you have geopolitics encountering sovereignty, and where you have economics encountering individual interests. And in many floors of these problems, you will have interests that you cannot align with others. It is not just the OSCE's responsibilities to sort out these problems, it's the responsibility of the respective societies to come to terms with the differences there are in these different participating states of the OSCE, be it one of the three Baltic states, or Ukraine for that matter, or any other state that is part of the OSCE. So one should not look just at the negative aspects that the OSCE is delivering. You have to accept that apart from the OSCE, there is no other mechanism at the moment available that would be able to bring everyone at the table. If there is any better mechanism, I'm sure the states that would contribute to it will make use of it. At the moment, there isn't any other available mechanism. And you can see it in the eastern part of Ukraine at the moment. The United Nations, it would be another platform to use to sort out the problem, has not been reaching the acceptance level at the geopolitical level to get engaged, and that is why the footprint of the United Nations is by far smaller than that of the OSCE at the moment. The OSCE isn't perfect, but it's the construct not of individuals, it's the construct of 57 participating states, which includes, in the case of Ukraine, the Russian Federation, as well as Ukraine itself. They have decided that they want to have this mission there. Without the vote of the Russian Federation and that of Ukraine, this mission would not be deployed because it requires a consensus vote for it. Thank you.
Actually, I feel important to come to stand up now for the OSCE mission. I'm Russian and I'm a refugee and I'm a journalist, and I also been following their situation in the Baltic states, raising these very hot issues of inequality there, which is unacceptable. So this point is very important. Trust is gained when human rights are respected and observed by any party, including EU. But with regard to the OSCE role in Ukraine and the role of the mission, I can tell you from my perspective, this is the only source of factual information, daily information, which can be trusted, because they provide the society with facts. And it's up to journalists and societies whether to respond to these facts or ignore them. Unfortunately, as of now, I see that these facts are ignored, also by journalists, especially in Europe.